Hey everyone, so I'm going to go over positive and negative feedback back from lecture 3, lab 3. So basically there's two different kinds of feedback loops. There's positive feedback, which is where the feedback that occurs, it progresses. It makes the same process increase. And then negative feedback is where the product, the output, it makes the process stop. So this enhances, so positive basically enhances whatever is happening, and this one stops what is happening. So let's go through a couple examples. So thermoregulation, is this positive or negative feedback? So you have a set point, right? That's your body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius, 98.6 Fahrenheit. If you get a stimulus that is that makes your body go above the set point, so like when it's very hot outside, your control center in your brain activates cooling mechanisms. So this causes a response such as your blood vessels to dilate and for sweat to be produced. This then causes your body temperature to drop back to the set point. Or the other way, if you have stimulus where your body temperature gets too low, those same control centers will activate warming mechanisms. So that's things like your blood vessels constricting, muscle shivering, and metabolic rates increasing, which then causes your body temperature to rise back to the set point again. So once it gets back to the set point, it doesn't continue unless the stimulus either changes it above or below the set point again. So if the response, like the blood vessels constricting to warm or dilating to cool, if that stops the response that was elicited initially from the stimulus of the increase or decrease in body temp, is this positive or negative feedback? And it's negative feedback. Okay. So another example that we went over in class. So the urinary system. You have two messages that you'll get from your pee. You're dehydrated if your urine is dark, and you're hydrated if your urine is pale. Okay? And basically what happens is it's a loop, right? So we want to figure out, is it a positive or a negative feedback loop? So say your body is hydrated, but now all of a sudden it becomes dehydrated. So the response is your brain releases ADH, right? And this is going to signal your kidneys to absorb water. So you have less water excreted, right? So now you're absorbing it. And because you're dehydrated, anything that you urinate at that time is going to be dark. Okay? But once you have enough ADH that was produced to increase the reabsorption of water, right? Your body is rehydrated. This ADH production is going to stop. It's no longer producing. Okay? Because now you're well hydrated. You're hydrated again. And any urine that comes out is going to be pale. So, is this positive or negative feedback? And the answer is negative feedback. So, here's an example from Lab 5 when we went over the hormone systems of the male and female. So let's take a look at this feedback loop and let's try and figure out if it's positive or negative feedback. So how sperm is produced is you have your hypothalamus, which is in your brain. It produces GnRH, which then stimulates your anterior pituitary, which is still also in your brain, to now secrete follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. FSH and LH will make Sertoli cells and Leydig cells respectively, but the FSH that makes the Sertoli cells, these cells are going to secrete inhibin, and this inhibin is going to go back to the anterior pituitary and stop the production of FSH, right? So, but another function these Sertoli cells do is they start spermatogenesis, okay? And spermatogenesis is just, you're making the sperm, right? And then the luteinizing hormone makes the Leydig cells, which produces testosterone, which then creates spermatogenesis, right? But once you have enough testosterone, instead of just making spermatogenesis, it's also going to go back to this anterior pituitary and to the hypothalamus to inhibit them, right? So that way they're no longer going to produce the luteinizing hormone or the follicle stimulating hormone. So the question is positive or negative feedback. And the answer is negative. So last example, this is going over the female hormone cycle. So what we're looking at here is so here in this graph, we're looking at the levels of FSH and LH during the hormonal cycle, indicated by the time down here. And basically what happens is you have the hypothalamus will release a hormone to tell the anterior pituitary to release FSH and LH at certain times in the cycle, right? And based off of the levels of LH and FSH, the growing follicle that is nurturing that egg to be fertilized is going to vary. So when the LH peaks, so when this peaks, this is when ovulation occurs. So all while it's increasing, you have the growing follicle, the maturing follicle, right? And now this leaves the ovary and is going to head to the uterus through the fallopian tubes. The decrease in the luteinizing hormone then causes for the follicle to get all crusty and basically degenerate, right? So another reason, so pretty much why this happens is because this FSH and the LH stimulate the different levels of estrogen and progesterone, right? So the LH is stimulating estrogen, okay? And then estrogen is also excreted by the follicle. So the follicle excretes estrogen. And the follicle started forming because of estrogen. So the follicle started forming because of estrogen. and the follicle also excretes estrogen, this excreted estrogen by the follicle will then make the follicle continue to grow, right? So the question here is this positive or negative feedback? And this one is positive. This is our very first positive one, right? Because what initially started that follicle to grow is the estrogen that was signaled to be released by the luteinizing hormone. Once that follicle starts to grow, the follicle now excretes the estrogen, which then signals it to grow even more. And this keeps on going until that luteinizing hormone peaks up here and to tell the follicle to release the egg. Once the follicle is not holding the egg anymore, this positive feedback stops. How negative feedback also occurs. Oh, okay. So, so I told you guys that this one is negative, but the female hormone cycle isn't just positive feedback, it's also negative feedback. And the reason why for that is you have, so here so we talked about before ovulation, right? But after ovulation occurs, the progesterone, this one, here, let me change different color. So after ovulation, progesterone peaks, right? So estrogen is peaking. So estrogen is high before ovulation. And progesterone is high after ovulation. Okay, so once this progesterone increases, this then signals for the, this progesterone goes back to the hypothalamus up here, which then inhibits the release of the releasing hormone, which will then release the, which will then inhibit the release of the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone. So after luteinizing hormone peaks, which causes ovulation to occur, the progesterone increases, but also your estrogen increases. Both of these, both estrogen and progesterone, act onto the hypothalamus to act in a negative feedback. Okay, I hope this cleared things up, and yeah.